Okay, so now that we have everything set up, we need to actually see or learn what a parser exactly is and how it works, okay? So let's go to the website that we're going to be parsing. So here I just have a sample recipe pulled up on my browser. And we see that this is how the recipe page looks like. So what will our parser be doing? Well, the question that I always like to ask myself when I'm about to do these kinds of things is, if I was to do this thing manually, so if I were given the task of, extracting the information of this recipe page myself, and I'd have to do it manually, how would I do it? Well, I already have the list of URLs loaded up, so I would get one URL, open it up like I've just done here, and then simply I would grab this title, I would copy it, and I would put it somewhere, for example, in my database. Then when it comes to the image, well, here's the bigger version of the image, so I would simply get this bigger image and save the image as to some kind of directory or save it to my database. I would go ahead and do the exact same for these things here, so this information here, so the prep time, the cook time, the ingredients, and the directions. So essentially what I'm doing is, I know I need certain bits of the page, I don't need the entire page, so I need to copy them selectively and, store them in another place, so for example in my database. Okay, so this is how I would do it. Well, how does a parser do it? Now, a parser obviously doesn't see this information we see because this is the graphical representation, but what the parser does see is the source of the page. So this is what the parser will be getting, okay? So the parser is getting the HTML of the page, which is basically, the exact same thing, although this is more for humans and this is maybe more for actual, programs. So what the parser will be doing is looking for all of those elements on this page. So for example, the title. Let's see if we're lucky, and if we search for a title, then here we see that this is some kind of JavaScript, so maybe this isn't that easy to parse. It's always better to find some kind of HTML, okay? This is JavaScript, so let's, skip that. But here we see, we have a title tag, and we already have the bourbon chicken recipe inside of the title, although there is this food.com, so maybe we want to avoid using this as well. But here, look, here we have found a tag, which is called, the property is OG title. This is a open graph tag. We don't really need to know what it is. Anyway, the content is bourbon chicken, so it's exactly what we need. So it's this thing here, okay? Actually, if we were to look for bourbon chicken inside of this HTML, and we see it appears in various parts of the website, but this is probably the one that's here, okay? So this one, which is a H1, and it has a class of FN and an item prop name, and in here we have the bourbon chicken again. So let's actually go ahead and inspect this element. This is maybe a easier way of finding out where elements are placed on the website. So I just right-clicked on chicken and clicked inspect element, and it took me to the actual element inside of the DOM, which accounts for, presenting this on the screen. So here it is, the H1 class, FN, item prop name, and the content of this tag is bourbon chicken. So we will definitely want to extract this, okay? We'll see how the parser actually extracts this, but the important thing here is to, when we are parsing a website, we need to do this exercise of running through which bits of information we need to extract and how to locate them on the screen. So the way of locating the title is, we know we need to grab the H1 of class FN, or maybe the H1 of item prop name, and inside we are pretty sure to have the title of the recipe, okay? So this is one thing. Let's see how maybe we can find the prep time and the cook time. So I'm going to select this, right click, inspect item, and here we have it, right? We have a paragraph with class prep time, and inside we have another tag, meta item prep time, content pt 15m, okay? And inside we have 15 minutes. All of these meta item props are basically a way to tell search engines that this is some structured information, and somewhere here, see here, they have another item scope, item type, which basically says what kind of items we're talking about, and probably somewhere above the page they have another item type which tells the search engines that this is a recipe. Okay, we don't have to worry about this, but what this allows us to do, if these websites use this kind of schema.org item types and stuff like that, is that oftentimes they will structure this information for us. So maybe here, instead of grabbing this 15 mins, which is unstructured information, because we would have to actually interpret what mins means, and if we wanted to present recipe in hours on our site, for example, we'd have to convert this to hours. But by using this value here, which is much more structured, PT15M, we know that this is 15 minutes because it has an M after. So if this was 1H, then this would be 1 hour, so on and so forth. So this is a nice way of parsing these values, and they're a bit more structured, because anyone could maybe type a typo here inside of mins, or maybe instead of typing H for hours, they type in HRS or something like that. So this is always much more structured and much more standardized. Okay, so here we'll be extracting this value here for the prep time, and then the same for cook time. Okay, so cook time is here, and we will be extracting this value here. Okay, so what about the image? Well, if we right click and inspect element, we see that the image is here, but we see, let's open it up, and we see it's a small image, right? We want to save a larger version of this image. So one thing we can do is we can see if playing around with these values, here I see that they're passing some parameters in. So maybe playing around with this and kind of, deleting that, see if, look, see, we got the huge image. Okay, so this is one way of getting the full-sized image. Let's see if we can, here what we did is we deleted all of these parameters. So that's not ideal, because ideally we want this to be somewhere in the HTML so we can fetch it or grab it directly. So let's look for this in the HTML. So this is probably the image that we just clicked. Okay, so I'm going to see if we have this version without the parameters somewhere. And apparently not. So we have to figure out another way of extracting the image. And so I didn't find browsing quickly through the source code, I didn't find another way of grabbing this bigger image. Maybe it's there. If you want, you can spend more time looking for it. But I've just decided it's still pretty easy to grab this source and then simply chop off all of the parameters. Okay, so we'll do this by code, and we'll just chop off everything that comes after the question mark. Okay. So that's what we'll do. Okay, and then let's see the ingredients, how we will fetch them, because this is a list, so this may be a bit tricky. But here we see, look, we see this is an entire UL, okay? And the UL, all of the ingredients are inside of a li of class ingredients, item prop ingredients. Okay, so this should be fairly easy to fetch. We just need to fetch all of them. And now let's check directions. And the directions are also inside of a span class instructions, item prop recipe instructions. They are in a OL, and each direction or each instruction is inside of a li, and we need to grab the txt. We don't want this num. This num is just the number of each instruction. So here 4, for example, is this 4 here. Okay, nice. So I believe we know how to parse this website. We have just figured out, how to grab each items. And if you feel slightly confused now what we mean by grabbing items, don't worry, because now we'll actually see how a parser works, okay? So we will be telling the parser to grab all of these, H1s and LIs and all that, because, well, we need to feed it with this information of how to grab each item. So that's what we'll be doing with our parser. And for the meantime, we need to actually download the library, which is the parser itself, and add it to our project, okay?